We're joined now by our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, we've got a story today that would be absolutely pathetic and hysterical if it wasn't so serious. We have an elementary school librarian by the name of Roger Grape. There's a picture of him in his fetish outfit, who in his private time is into BDSM, homosexual behavior, a big advocate for that. But he's also responsible for getting a convicted prostitute drag queen to speak to elementary kids, to read books to elementary kids in Austin, Texas. Start by just giving us the background. What in the world happened here?
Yeah, thank you, Duke. This is a huge story. It's an outrageous story. Parents are completely furious, and they're right to be furious. So kudos to Mass Resistance, the pro-family group that dug this up. But basically, you have this, sex pervert librarian. His stage name is Leatherman. He dresses up in like these leather tongas, and he goes to this thing called Austin Gears, where on the website it says you can find him flogging other men. Very, very weird stuff. You can see, we just showed a picture of him doing something called fisting. Absolutely grotesque behavior, and we won't get into the details of that. But this guy deliberately skirted a background check to get his friend, a convicted male prostitute, aka Miss Kitty Litter, a drag queen, to be able to read homosexual, transgender stories to elementary school children at this school. And so parents are very mad now. The truth is coming out through Freedom of Information Act requests. And this is in Texas, by the way. This isn't California, as it normally is. This is Texas.
You've got a guy who moonlights as a radical sex performer who engages in, like you said, some of the most really outrageous forms of homosexual sex, including that symbol. If you go back to the picture, Mike, that sign he's showing you right there is the sign for an act called fisting, inserting a fist someplace we're not going to mention here. And so this guy in the day is a elementary school librarian. And talk a little bit more for our audience, Alex. How did he get around the rules to get this to Miss Kitty Litter to read? We have email confirmation that this is happening back and forth, right?
That's right. Yep. Through the Freedom of Information Act, they were able to get the text messages between Leatherman and Miss Kitty Litter. And so Leatherman, the librarian, Mr. Grape, who's been working as a librarian or as a teacher in an elementary school for over 15 years now, where do they find these people? They were corresponding back and forth. And so Leatherman knew that Miss Kitty Litter would not be allowed because he had what's called a withhold of adjudication on a prostitution case, a sex offender case. And so basically this is him pleading guilty in exchange for the judge not putting down a ruling. And this happens a lot in court, and typically people consider this to be a conviction because basically the person is pleading guilty, which is functionally the same thing as a conviction. But some loophole in Texas allows them to claim that this is not a conviction. So when Miss Kitty Litter was asked if you've been convicted of any crimes, it said no. And, they conspired. Mr. Grape conspired with Miss Kitty Litter to get around this protections. And the principal of the school was sent an email by one of the parents saying, hey, we don't want our kid participating. It was the LGBTQ plus Pride Week. And the parents said, we don't want our child participating in this. And the principal wrote back and said, oh, whatever, all of them were thoroughly checked and all this. Turns out that wasn't true. They deliberately went around the procedures that have been put in place to protect children from perverts and from predators so that they could bring in this Miss Kitty Litter and sexualize and groom these little children.
Do we know for sure if the principal knew of that information when he made his statement? He must have, right?
It's a good question. We don't know for sure. We don't have any documentation showing one way or the other. But if he didn't know, why not? Why are you hiring, sex fiend perverts who run around whipping each other and doing fisting out in the open, right? I mean, this isn't like in the sanctity of their own bedroom, if you will. This is out in the open at nightclubs. Everybody knows it's posted all over the internet. Why would you hire these kind of people? And then even worse, why would you let them bring their pervert friends in to read to little children? I think that's gross irresponsibility.
Alex, we're going to pick this up again on the other side of the commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are discussing a really alarming situation in Austin, Texas. Now, again, when we talk about Texas, we realize that Austin is really kind of San Francisco in Texas. We also realize that Austin, I think the motto for Austin is "Let's keep Austin weird." Well, I guess with Mr. Leatherman, you got it about as freaky as possible down there. But why is it, Alex, that even in a state like Texas, where you would expect more in terms of protecting children, why is it that a school district, an elementary, maybe I could see this fly if this was a high school, maybe, but you're taking the tenderest, littlest kids now, elementary school kids, and you're exposing them to people like Miss Kitty Litter. Again, the vetting had to be undermined by Mr. Leatherman. Let's be very clear about that. The librarian, Roger Grape, he actually betrayed his own school by working with this transvestite prostitute who had been arrested and convicted. He violated his own school's rule, and we're going to have to keep an eye on what kind of punishment, if any he gets for this. He ought to be severely punished, if not fired, for that. Nevertheless, let's talk a little bit about the utility or the necessity of this kind of reading adventures for little kids. Why are we exposing 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds to this at all?
Yeah, Duke, it's a good question, and the answer is actually pretty simple, and it's pretty frightening. The organized homosexual movement decades ago went on a campaign to try to normalize homosexuality, and they've largely succeeded in mainstream culture in the United States. But the American people have largely forgotten that even it wasn't until the year 2000 or 2001 that the Supreme Court actually struck down Texas's anti-sodomy laws. It was a crime to perpetrate sodomy in Texas less than 2 decades ago. All over the world, all throughout human history, except in the most degenerate, crumbling nations and cultures, homosexuality has at least been frowned upon, if not an outright criminal offense that would be punished severely. And so the organized homosexual movement in the United States, going back to the 70s and 80s, came up with this comprehensive strategy to try to first normalize and then promote this lifestyle to all of the American people. And they recognized that they would have to focus on the youngest of children because older Americans, they've already thought about this, they've already rejected homosexuality, they already consider it something that's bad, sinful, dirty, whatever, unhealthy at the very least. And so they went for the children. And we actually have a clip of a documentary that was shown in government schools in the early 1990s called It's Elementary, talking about gay issues at school. And again, this was back when sodomy was still a crime across most of the United States.
In the middle, think I should add lesbian too?
Yeah.
Okay. It's already there. It's already in the classroom. The kids are already thinking about it. There's ways that are pretty standard elementary curriculum across this country, which, with a little inventiveness, you can start going on.
And what they do is they try to tell these kids that homosexuality is normal, and yet there's these discriminatory, mean old laws and mean people who don't want people who love each other to be able to be together. So they have these kids imagine themselves as pretend judges. And, even the UN has been pretty honest about this. They actually hired an LGBT czar, a homosexual activist from Thailand, who was very clear. I read in an Argentinian newspaper, I think we were the first, maybe the only ones in the United States to report it at the New American Magazine, where they said the younger the better, right? Because when you can get them younger, they're more impressionable. They haven't yet been exposed to, religious ideas, their parents' ideas. They haven't yet started thinking about things rationally. And so there's a very deliberate agenda to target the youngest of children because they figure if they can get the young kids on board, once they're older, they'll be very pro-homosexuality. And so that's why they're targeting kids, Duke. It's that simple. And I think there's even another element. A lot of people have speculated that this is actually kind of a grooming operation. And I personally think there's something to that.
I do as well. I mean, if you're taking kids who are too young, who have not had, they don't have critical thinking skills. Their young minds have not begun to allow them to think abstractly. They're literal at those youngest of ages. And when you're feeding these kids this kind of one-sided extremist propaganda for very outrageous forms of sex and sexuality, these kids have no choice but to, when their authorities, their teachers, their schools are peddling this nonsense, it doesn't surprise me in the least. It is a kind of grooming. You are preparing kids not just to accept but to participate in this kind of stuff, because to not do it, given the culture, would make you seem like the outlier. Alex, we've only got about 30 seconds left. What do you think the next steps are? There's been no comment from Roger Grape. What do you think how this story should play out?
Well, if I was a parent in Texas or any other place, I mean, if this will happen in Texas, it'll happen anywhere. It's time for parents to take action to protect their children. The schools aren't going to do it. The government's not going to do it. It's either going to be you, mom and dad, or your kids are going to be exposed to this, sexualized, indoctrinated, and you're going to wake up and find yourself living with a stranger, a kid who hates you and rejects your values, and that's very sad. So parents, pay attention.
Alex Newman, thank you for the great report. We are definitely going to keep updating this one as the time goes by. Thank you.